Hi, viewers, and welcome to London Lights. Today, we're going to talk about part two of the topic called the Golden Age of Radio in London, Ontario, and the Golden Age of the disc jockey. My guest today is the iconic radio DJ, Dick Williams. Dick's affectionately known as the Tall One due to his 6-foot, 3-inch frame, and Dick's been broadcasting for over 50 years now. In his heyday in the 1960s, he was one of 4 iconic DJs in London known as the Lively Guys: Bill Brady, John Dickens, Al Mitchell, and Dick Williams. Dick is considered one of the best DJs in the country, and Bill Brady, who really knows his stuff, says Dick is simply the best. Dick's still heard every Saturday and Sunday on local AM 980 radio with his very cool show, Solid Gold Rock and Roll. Dick, I love the show, and welcome to London Lights. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. I think the word silver could be replaced the word golden.
Now, Dick, I understand that you live part of the year in Port Stanley and part of the year in Key West, Florida.
Yeah.
Something tells me that you like the beach.
Yeah, I do. Although I don't spend a lot of time on it. I mean, that's for young folks. But I have a beautiful perch just above the beach. And certainly it's fun to watch all the young folks cantering around and cavorting on the beach during the daytime. And then, of course, at night, it gets a little bit rowdy out in front of our place. But that comes with the territory. So that's fun and dandy. That's what you come to Key West for, is some fun, you know?
Yeah, right. Well, that might explain your somewhat Jimmy Buffett style that you have, or the impression that I get when I listen to you. It's kind of a fun, laid back, beach type style. Have you ever met Jimmy Buffett?
Met him just in passing, and several other trop rock artists that have performed down there. Jimmy used to just do it for tips out in front of an old restaurant years and years ago. And, 50 cents would be a big take for him on that day. He's changed a little bit, owning now the hotel chains and all the various margarita bars all over America and all over the world, for that matter. So it's a great place to be based. And when he's in town, there's a definite vibe change in the air. That's for sure.
Oh, that's cool. Well, we're in season 3 of London Lights, and in season 2, I think it might have been season 1, we had Bill Brady on as a guest. Very popular interview that we did with him. And Bill was great as usual. He really looks up to you, and he said nice things about you. But we were talking about the golden age of radio and the golden age of disc jockeys in London. You guys were a big presence on the local scene. And what was it that made the golden age of radio in the 1960s, 1970s such a special time?
Well, I think for one thing, the competition wasn't as fierce as it is now. In those days, there were only really 3 radio stations. That was CFPL AM, CFPL FM, and CKSL, with a little addition of CHLO in St. Thomas as the 4th. Now, of course, there's probably close to 20 radio stations in both English and French coming into the area as a prime signal. So the competition has changed immensely. Plus the fact that being with the Free Press, we had the beautiful benefits of cross promotion, radio to TV, radio to newspaper. We had an unlimited budget for outdoor advertising, billboards, et cetera, and basically used every nickel of the money that available to them from promotion to promote the Lively Guys. And we were on remote virtually every single day, 7 days a week. I probably didn't do more than 1 or 2 studio shows a year in the actual studio. So you had television recognition because somebody's going out shopping, chances are pretty good they'd run into you or one of your counterparts during the broadcast day at Patton's Place, let's say, or London Furniture, Lion Auto Supply, Savettes, you name it, we were there. And then, of course, on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, we had the CFP helicopter, which was a helicopter that did aerial traffic from the beaches. And we also had remotes on the ground in both Port Stanley and Grand Bend. So it was pretty much a omnipresent presence. The Lively Guys were, generally speaking, if there was action to be had, it was with us.
I remember it as such a fun time, Dick, listening to the radio and the celebrities of the disc jockeys made it such a fun thing. Did you have a lot of freedom to pursue the things you wanted to do on radio, or were things kind of constrained?
Ward Cornell, when he hired me, said, Dick, I want numbers in the evening. We don't have any teens right now. I think it's a good idea for us to beef up our audience to be in the future and get them to be CFPL listeners. And you do whatever it is it takes, and I'll support you with the finances to make it happen. And I don't really care in the day-to-day operation what in the heck you do. That's up to you. I'm paying you to have the expertise to do it, have fun, and stay within the bounds of broadcasting. So, for example, today you never could think of doing something like this, but I mean, I played every song that I wanted, not what some far off program director in Vancouver dictated would be played in London, Ontario, who had no idea what was going on in London itself. So basically, I got to play the music. I got to play as many hits an hour as I wanted to. If a particular song came out and I had an exclusive on it, nothing stopped me from playing it 2 or 3 times right in a row, back to back to back. Let's do it again, instant replay. So that was
Fantastic.
it. Yeah, and just have fun, do whatever comes into your mind, which usually worked out well. But there's one story that I think kind of epitomizes it. And I was driving down the street one day, actually in the countryside, and I saw a bunch of dandelions by the side of the road. I thought it'd be a good idea to have a contest and ask our listeners to send us their favorite dandelion. So they did, of course. And then some farmers got in the act and they brought in bushel baskets full of dandelions and also full of creepy, crawly critters that started to crawl out of the little baskets after the first day. And the dandelions started to leak all over the floors. And it got to be a mess to the point we had to have the entire studios fumigated. And Ward Cornell called me and said, and by the way, you'll be footing the bill for the fumigation day.
I want to mention your book, A DJ's Spin. I read the book. It's just chock full of some of these fun memories that you're talking about. And our program today is only half an hour. But if viewers are interested in learning more about that time, they should get a hold of your book. And one of the favorite things I enjoyed about the book was your talking about broadcasting on site at the Western Fair. This was back when the Western Fair was a real big deal. And it's hard to describe for the young people today what the Western Fair was like at the time. But I loved your talk and your recollection about being at the Western Fair and the chimpanzee. Can you tell us something about that for our viewers?
We had a chimp called Chatter who we contracted with, and he was basically our mascot during Western Fair Week for every 10, the 10 days the fair ran. And Chatter, on the first time he saw me, I was dressed up. In those days, you went to work with a suit and tie on, dressed to the nines. Today, you just show up with a t-shirt or whatever you happen to have on your back. Chatter took one look at me and came dashing across the compound where our display was and pulled me to the ground. And a chimp can move very fast, and they have far more strength than you can even imagine. He had me flat in my back in a moment and proceeded to rip off my loafers. And I had on those long executive socks that reached up to the knee. Chatter was enchanted, and nothing would do but what he'd pull that off. And that happened every single day without fail. First thing I walked onto the area at the fair, Chatter and I would go through our sock pull off. And at one point, I left Chatter to MC a band that was actually on our stage during my show. And I saw that Chatter had sat himself down in my broadcast chair with the microphone in front of it. And he put on my headphones. And I thought, my God, that's quite an animal. That's brilliant for a chimpanzee to mock somebody and do what the disc jockey is doing. And at that point, he bit the foam on the end of the microphone. I thought, well, needs a little work, but we were best of friends. And I adored looking forward to seeing him every single day. And the fans, who were watching at the fair, which was, as you say, a huge deal in those days, again, the only game in town during the early fall, they loved it too. And of course, that was during the space race. So we had the idea of boosting me into space. And we constructed a construction elevator that was normally used to lift and take down bricks and bric-a-brac from construction sites. So they put my broadcast console on this, and it would shoot 80 feet up in the air. and you could stop at the top and do the show from 80 feet up and look down on everyone. And after about 3 or 4 days, the operator of the lift decided it'd be good to do a little free fall. So he just pushed the clutch in, and I dropped free fall like
Oh,
about 60 feet. And then he put the brakes on at the very last minute. But I mean, in the meantime, my shade umbrella had inflated and flown off. It was just you never knew what was going to happen. Anyway, that's it.
well, it sure sounds like creativity abounded during those days, and I like the fact that there was so much freedom for the disc jockeys to do what they thought would be fun. And
I'm not playing down the way radio is structured today, but basically, it's a lot of repetitious liners that make the station sound very homogenous 24 hours a day, but the not too hard, not too soft. We're the station you can listen to all day at work. Um, that's fine and dandy for a positioning statement, but it does sort of bland things out a little bit.
yeah, well, I mean, it's really about the music at the end
That's
of the
right.
day.
That's right.
And music, of course, is such a wonderful thing in our lives. I love the fact that you'd have the freedom to play the songs that you wanted. You didn't have to play what was dictated to you by someone, as you say, in Vancouver. And you were one of the first, if not the first, disc jockey in North America to play a Beatles tune. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was the first by about a year. And basically, it came about because of a lady named Rita Wood who worked at EMI, Capitol Records in London, England. And basically, she left to come to Canada and was a big, huge Cliff Richard fan. She just adored Cliff. But then all of a sudden, the Beatles came along. So I already had Cliff Richard's records a week or two before they were even released in Canada. When the Beatles came along, a different story. I knew they were coming from reading international trade magazines. But as soon as I could get my hands on a Beatles record, which Rita was able to ship to me within about 2 days of the recording session, test pressings, I would get them. And again, there was nothing to stop me from playing them. I had them in my hand, so I put them on the turntable and played them. Was it legal? I don't really know. Capitol Records Canada was not too thrilled with my jumping the gun because they hadn't even secured the broadcast rights to sell the Beatles in Canada. So they were more than just a little annoyed. But what the heck, if you've got that as an exclusive and you can play that on the air, and then just to make sure that nobody copied it off the air, in the middle of when I was playing a Beatles song, like 8 days a week, whatever it may be, I would put a little whispered exclamation, CFPL exclusive, so that nobody else could tape it off me and play it on another station.
Sure.
So that,
Oh, that's great. And
that
I
didn't
remember
make
reading about a local DJ that also broke Creedence Clearwater Revival. He
yeah,
was one of the first to play Susie Q, I think it was,
great
and
song.
that made the band huge,
Yeah.
all because of a local disc jockey.
That's right. Well, that started back basically with Alan Freed and the gang in Buffalo at WKBW, where one of the disc jockeys, Tom Clay, locked himself in the control room over there and played a song 4 or 5 times in a row. And of course, the police were called. This never happened with me, but thank God.
Well, that's great. Hey, Dick, I'm enjoying these stories, but we do have to take a quick break. So
Sure.
just hang on. We'll be right back, viewers, with the great, iconic Dick Williams, disc jockey. Hi, viewers. We're back on London Lights with iconic disc jockey Dick Williams. Dick, if there's one thing again we could describe about your tenure and the other lively guys in London, it was fun. It was a fun time. Can you share some of those fun memories with us?
Well, one kind of neat thing that happened to me very early in my career when I was still in Kitchener at a 250-watt AM station called CKCR. It was a time when they started doing radio marathons. So I went to the program director there and said, "Can I do a marathon for some sort of charity? You hook it up and I'll volunteer my services." So they put me on the air starting on Monday morning at 6 a.m. And it was what they call an announce operate situation. So you were not only announcing, but spinning your own records and running your own commercials. So it was a full-time job just to do when you were well rested and ready to go. Well, that started on Monday morning, and I was live 24 hours a day on air until Friday afternoon around 1:30 or so, when I finally faded after about 160 hours. I can't recall the exact math, but I fell asleep right in the middle of reading a live commercial. I wake up and there's drool all over the copy. It's time to stop. That's
Oh,
enough.
wow.
That was fun to do though, and it certainly raised a lot of money, and I had a lot of fun. And I got to tell you, it was not uh, terribly amusing after the first couple of days staying awake.
Yeah.
A lot of psychosis set in, and whoa, don't want to do that again ever.
Oh boy. Well, one of the things I heard you did is ride a moped through an East End store. What was that about?
Yeah, there again, that's the collective intelligence of all the jocks, all the lively guys, and Ward Cornell, who was just brilliant in terms of organizing us and focusing us a little bit. And the idea came up in one of our jock meetings to take a Honda motorbike, a scooter, essentially, and put a gallon of gas in it and see how far we could ride around the core of the city. So we went Queens Avenue, turned left on Richmond down to King, I believe, out King to Adelaide, and then up and then back on Queens Avenue past the old Free Press building on Queens Avenue. So that was our circuit, and we were followed on the scooter with our broadcast studio, the Mach 2 mobile unit, and we had a telephone in it. You know, I mean, incredible. It was a cell phone essentially, and you could broadcast live on the go. So they would follow us. Well, at one point, we switched off about every 45 minutes or so. And if Brady had been on, or Dave Wilson or Al Mitchell had been on the scooter, one of the other guys took over and somebody else did the driving chores and did the description for cut ins. Brady, as he would always do, was just incredibly inventive. And the next thing I know is he's taken a left hand turn going east, I guess, on Dundas Street, and he drove the scooter right through Lion Auto Supply, front door, out the back door. You know, so when it was my turn, I came along York Street and saw the A&W drive-in, and I made it a drive-through. I drove right through their little booth there and ordered a hamburger, drove out the other side. So that was kind of cute, and it went on. The thing ran for something like 100 miles or something on a gallon of gas. It was a great contest and well respected. And the other one I think was the best example of what radio and the power of radio can do. I learned that there was going to be a solar eclipse of the sun on a summer afternoon back in around 62. And we promoted it on the air, and I pre-promoted it with a trailer a la in the days when, you know, so we were saying, thank you for making us #1 at CFPL. In appreciation, we will present the solar eclipse of the sun for London radio listeners. So I'm on remote when it actually came up to be, and the skies clouded over. And the call started at the radio station. What's happening with your eclipse? Are you going to do it after the clouds go away? Or, well, it doesn't work quite that way, boys and girls. But again, the best laid plans, you know, would have been great had it happened the way it was supposed to.
Hey, Dick, you mentioned that at one time, the Blackburn Group, they ran the local TV show programs, signals. They ran radio. They ran London Free Press. So did you get involved in any of the television broadcasts as well?
Oh, sure. I had several shows. I did Hootenanny, an outdoor folk music show. That was about 4 years after the folk music craze had died. Took them a long time to make the decisions. I also did Wingding, which was a great Dick Clark American Bandstand style show that came on the air after Dick Clark had left the air. Again, wrong time, wrong place. Great looking show, but it was the wrong time for it. I was the host of Act Fast before Bill Brady.
Wow.
And Bill took it over from me as part of his contract when he came back from Toronto, CKUY, and that was part of his deal to get his radio show. So I did a lot of TV, and it was always fun. But radio is what I love doing because you can really control your own fate. On television, you so much depend on the lights being right, the director taking the right shot at the right time. It's totally out of your control. And that, with a radio background like I have, it's something I don't feel terribly comfortable in as much as radio.
Bill Brady had the same comment about that. It would drive him crazy having to sit around and wait around for the lights to be just tuned right and that kind of thing. Wanted to talk about London. London was recently recognized as a music city and received recognition for that. What was the London music scene like back in the day when you were on radio?
Well, very busy, and certainly no dearth of local bands. I recall one band called Ocean that you may have heard of. Put your hand in the hand of the man. Well, those guys played for me at Record Hops for the Optimist Club on Oxford Street behind the Bell Building where that big microwave tower is. And we would have the Saturday night fights there every Saturday night. The kids had come. Of course, there was always the one or two that had a few too many sips of hard pop before they walked in the door. So the bands would be playing, doing their best stuff. And of course, there would naturally be a fight. And
Yeah,
that was
right.
just part of the activity. And you cleaned them off and on you went. But there were certainly lots of local bands that were striving to do things. Grant Smith and the Power, for example, a good friend, and Grant went on to a great career in Las Vegas. Ray Hutchison, of course, with the Beaumarks, and then later on his own, a beautiful voice, not akin, not too far off what Roy Orbison sounded like. He had
Mm.
that beautiful high range that he could sing in. So there were a lot of musical talent available to watch and to promote during my era.
Well, one of the fun things I remember too is all the record stores in London.
Oh yeah.
Downtown London was chock full of record stores. And if you wanted to find your favorite record or your album, you could go to all of them and find where you might save 50 cents on the new album that you wanted to get by the Monkees, the Beatles, or Cream, or whoever.
That's right.
And one of the cool things they had were these charts. I think oftentimes prepared by the disc jockeys. I'm not sure if you were involved in that,
Oh
but
yeah.
it would give you the top 40 hits.
That's it.
You could find out what was number one that week or what was a rising hit and maybe buy that record as well. Do you
That's
remember those days?
Oh, certainly. And I just thought it was such a shame to have this special printing unit of the Free Press, sort of a subset of the London Free Press, down in our basement on Queens Avenue. And so, again, without checking with anybody, I talked to some of the record companies and said, how'd you like to supply us with 25 or 50 45s as prizes to give away? And that'll be our pick hit of the week. And it'll allow me to publish a Fabulous 40 survey, which we ended up printing about 10,000 a week. And they were, of course, eagerly snapped up by listeners that wanted to make sure that their record was doing well or how it had fared that week in the charts. So with that and a bit of advertising, it more than paid for itself. And again, I was called into Ward's office and said, I don't recall authorizing you to print a Fabulous 40 survey. Well, it just seemed like a good idea at the time, Ward, and that was generally the end of it.
Well, that's
Ward was
great.
such a terrific guy, though. I mean, we took a bunch of students to Expo 67 and tasked them with being tour guides. They would go to, let's say, the Russian pavilion and report on what they had seen at the Russian pavilion. And then they'd be back on the air, and we broadcast live from Montreal. So you can imagine that all the parents and all the school children were listening to hear their contemporaries on AM 980 on the weekend. I'm coming back in the bar car with Ward after the successful event. And I said, Ward, I got to thank you a million times for just being such a great boss. And he said, Dick, as long as your numbers are fine, you're never going to hear from me. I said, if they change, we'll
Right.
talk.
Hey, well, if viewers want to get a taste of what it was like back in the 60s and 70s when you were on radio, you've got this weekend show in London on 980 AM. What hours should people tune in
Well,
to
that's
hear
on
your show and some of those cool special effects and everything that you have going?
That's on Saturday and Sunday from 11 o'clock in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Repeats on the Sunday. And it's so much fun to do and research and do all the information gathering to make sure it's a really rapid moving program. And again, doing it from home, you don't have the problems you do in a radio station with the congestion at this recording studio. The guys at the station had to get in to record their elements for their own shows too. So you were forever there'd be a knock on the door. Can you get out of there real soon? Whereas at home, you can play with it and spend an extra 10, 15 minutes just to tighten things up and make everything just sing before it hits the airwaves.
Well, Dick, it's great hearing your voice. It just brings back so many memories. You sound the same as you did a generation ago. And it's really refreshing for me to hear that and to hear these stories. Is there a future for disc jockeys, radio broadcasting? I know the world has changed so much, but what do you say about that?
I think certainly there always is and always will be, depending on people who are able to adapt and flex with the times. I mean, you see Howard Stern, who is on terrestrial radio again, and cousin Brucey and such. They've all made the necessary adjustments to make it happen. And radio's demise has always been, when television came along, radio was done. When stereo came along, AM radio was done. Well, it's strange. AM radio still exists and will. And it's the first things you turn to when you need information of a local nature and you need it right then. You can always count on radio and, generally speaking, an announcer or disc jockey to let you know what's going on in your town. And that's the beauty of it, that you touch so many people's lives so closely in a market. And the best major market broadcasters, Dick Purton, for example, from WOMC in Detroit, treat all of their markets like a small town. They're name dropping people's names all the time. And it draws them into a local feeling of community. And that's the way a successful disc jockey of the future or broadcaster of the future will have to do.
Thanks for being on London Lights. Hearing your voice and hearing these stories sure brings back some great memories for me of the golden age of radio in London, Ontario, and the golden age of the disc jockey. You take care of yourself. Say hi to Jimmy Buffett for me, and we'll see you again sometime.
Thanks very much for everything. We'll see you soon.